We can actually demonstrate now a theory which shows that UFOs are on specific orbital tracks around the Earth.
How long ago did you first say that?
Well, it was 30 years ago, I think. We'll call them artificial probes that are within our atmosphere at a high altitude. You're talking about, what, say, 60 kilometers up, approximately 70. It's below the Kármán line, of the atmosphere and outer space, so to speak. Where you'd have the ISS is at, 90 kilometers. You're dealing with the hypothesis of plasma craft and the dynamics behind a plasma craft, what it can do that we can't do. We're just nowhere near anything to what these others are doing, is that they can morph and change the dynamics in there, and therefore can also change the construct that's there to present it to us. May it be a classical flying saucer disk, to a cylindrical craft and such like. Most people see them as ball.
Say that again. Just spell that out for me. I'm sorry to make you do this again, but they can transform. They can choose the physical shape they appear to us as, but they're otherwise an energy craft.
Yeah, once you have some understanding of the plasma and how it operates, and then you have to integrate the bioenergetic side of things, the pilot, you like to call it, in there, who are one with the craft. And I only learned this from the Mexican landings way back in the 90s, and it's sort of, I see how they're doing it. So I think actually they can present themselves in different ways to people that's acceptable.
Our guest tonight is Dr. Eamonn Ansbro, an Irish astronomer and the Chief Executive Officer at Space Explorations Limited, where he develops next-generation communication systems for the space industry. He holds a Master of Science in Astronomy from the University of Western Sydney in Australia, and both a Master of Philosophy and a Doctor of Philosophy in Planetary Space Sciences from the Open University in the UK. Dr. Ansbro is a Fellow of the Royal Astronomical Society, serves as the Irish National Coordinator for the International Astronomical Union in Astronomy Education, and chairs Space and Science for the International Coalition for Extraterrestrial Research. He's also a member of the United Kingdom's Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence Research Network. Over the course of his career, he has investigated more than 150 cases of unidentified aerial phenomena. His research has led him to propose that these phenomena may function as techno-signatures, part of an observational program around Earth, and even that non-human intelligence may be communicating with humans using neurological quantum processes such as entanglement and teleportation. I'm very excited about this interview. We had a little difficulty setting it up. There were some technical challenges. Dr. Ansbro lives in a remote location with limited bandwidth, so you'll notice that this interview is a little different. We had to record it over Zoom, but nevertheless, it is outstanding in every way. Dr. Ansbro is a scholar and a gentleman, and just a fantastically interesting person to talk to. We talked about Techno-Signatures in orbit. Of course, we talked about Dr. Beatrice Villarell's paper, the paper that her and her team have put out, suggesting that there may be, indeed, satellites in orbit that are of non-human origin. And we talked about quite a few other things. I know you're going to find this interview fascinating. Please, if you haven't already, consider subscribing to the channel. It only takes a moment. It doesn't cost a dime, and it really is the best way to help us continue doing the work that we do here. Thanks for watching. Now enjoy the interview with Dr. Eamonn Ansbro. Eamonn, welcome back. Thank you for carving out some time to talk to me. There's been quite a lot of news in just the last few weeks, astronomically speaking, and given your background and expertise, I could think of no one in a better position to ask about all of this than yourself. We had an opportunity to connect a few months ago and had a lovely discussion, and I'm excited to follow that up today. For people who haven't been familiar with your work, who aren't familiar with you, can you introduce yourself and your academic background and the work that you've done up till now?
Sure. Well, I'm an astronomer by profession, and I did my academic degrees at two universities, University of Western Sydney in Australia, and also at Open University in the UK. And my main research has been solar system studies, everything to do with the solar system, not outside the solar system. Okay, so so I've been at this. The research in question to do with the UAP area. That came about by accident because I did actually have a background a long time ago in meteorology and then eventually into astronomy. And it was just another colleague at another institution. They were getting a lot of telephone calls of lights in the sky, and he thought no better guy to look into this. This is back in 1990 now, so it's a long time ago. And I said, yeah, sure. I was looking for another project in the spare time, that is. And anyway, he gave me quite a lot of telephone numbers of people that had seen these lights. And it was from there I was totally confused. It didn't make any sense at all what they were looking at. So anyway, I decided to look into the UFO area at the time. And then I got onto databases in both the US, UK, and in France. At that time, there were very few databases and very few reports. You could be counting 30 or 40,000 reports in that time, different from nowadays. So I spent some weekends going through all the reports and discovered there was a commonality with what people were witnessing here in Ireland, that is. I realized, oh, this looks to be global, the whole thing. So that was my starting point. But then I had another problem. It's like, how am I going to meet people that have seen, UFOs? So what I did was, I thought I'd dare and do it, is that with the help of a colleague, is that we set up, we advertised for people in different parts of the country to attend these meetings that I was going to present at, and hopefully some people would come up with. So actually I did about 7 altogether during the period. So I'd have an average of about 60 or 70 people at a time at these meetings, and it was from there actually that I, from a confidential point of view, because I realized it was still a bit of a stigma, this area, is that so I followed up and I ended up carrying out over 10 years, that is 150 cases altogether. And it was enough for me to realize that we were dealing with definitely a new phenomena here that just didn't fit our mechanistic worldview. So I actually did start publishing way back 33 years ago, I think it was, because I was realizing that maybe patterns and cycles to it. And then that led into a much more advanced work to do with patterns and cycles during the late 90s. And then I did my first publication then to SETI in the US, San Jose, which wasn't received that too well. So that was my first time when I was more or less chucked out the door, So
I want to come back to the SETI thing, but can you talk a little bit about the patterns that you did find and what you came to understand about those, or what your thinking is about that? Because I think that's one of the most interesting things that turned me on initially to your work, was that you were seeing things that no one else seemed to be talking about.
That's right, I know, but you can understand the situation in the scientific community, and
Sure.
never mind the public, because obviously we've had a perception problem, regarding something like this. So actually in the early days, I was in all the calculations were showing, there's a purely hypothetical based on I think it was about 30,000 reports at the time, but it was narrowed down to, I think it was 1,300 that were reliable, that would be, multiply witnessed and so forth. And it was coming out to an orbital period around the Earth, that is, of the UFOs, of 65 minutes. I had some inclinations at the time which were much higher, and I did actually test out using timing graphs. So, in other words, there were opportunities, or shall I say, windows of opportunity, when events may occur at specific locations on the Earth at specific times within the qualifying limits for the actual theory to work, and this would be within plus or minus 20 minutes. So, did test it out. One or two of them did work, others didn't. And I thought this needs to be reviewed again. And anyway, I followed through eventually to relocate at an area. This was actually the setting up of the whole Kingsland Observatory. We have one or two other astronomers involved in this, at a location actually where there was high activity of UFOs. So I designed all the equipment and installed it there by the year 2001. And then we ended up over, say, 20 years of recording about 40 UFOs with different characteristics in them, which I think I had shown actually on a previous presentation to you back in March or April or something like that. But also it did fit in with the theory as well, that there seemed to be a correlation with it. So decided actually with another colleague from Norway that works with me, he's a physicist, to look into this further. I thought it was well worth doing it in light of all the stuff that coming through in the last 5 or 6 years from, the Pentagon, realize it's a reality, and, there is a change in thinking. So I felt a little bit more comfortable in coming forward in the last 2 or 3 years. So we did review it, and we ended up actually, surprisingly, based on two major databases, the New Fork one and the Hatch one, which is taken globally, that is. So we ended up with, I think it was roughly nearly 500 million, 500,000 reports, but we narrowed it down to, I think it was about 20,000. And then within that, we had to have reliable reports in order to fit the characteristics of the performance of the UFO. In other words, to do with velocity, to do with the high frequency in some areas, clustering and so forth. So from that, to my surprise, actually, we got a different inclinations. It wasn't the 53 degrees that I thought it might have been. And it's anything between 0 and 18 degrees. So it was more like a circumpolar type of orbital period, around the Earth. But there could be many of them. But it's all, the key to this actually is the orbits are synchronized with the rotation of the Earth. It's not a separate gravitational problem, dealing with artificial satellites and probes, like the IU.
So just back up for a moment, because I know a lot of what you're talking about we have touched on in a prior interview, and I've read some of your work and am familiar with it. But for people who are completely new to this, in very simple, basic terms, what are you saying? You found objects that appeared to be on orbital tracks that were following a preset pattern?
That's correct, yes.
And then as you got access to expanded databases, you found more and more cases that reinforce this view and this hypothesis?
Yes, that is correct.
And what period? So how certain are you, or how confident are you in that assessment of what you found today? Okay.
As a theory, I'm confident about it, but as for the evidence of the UFOs or UAPs turning up, that is currently in progress, meaning that we have only recently worked out some specific orbital tracks where there's intersections taking place around the Earth. And in order to test the theory, you have to be there.
Right.
So if if it turns up within plus or minus 20 minutes, oh my God, that works, And if you trust another location and the same thing happens and it's within plus or minus 20 minutes and it's working there, oh boy, I mean, that really is good news. So, but I've actually I've actually gone further beyond that, and that's something I want to present today, in order to, how shall I put it, to not just the possibility of the event turning up at that intersection, but also to have an interaction with it as well. You know, I don't want it to go to waste, so to speak.
Yes.
And the reason I brought this up, because this is what I presented last year in September in Hessdalen in Norway. There was about 60 scientists at this conference, you know, and I was the last speaker at it. And I mentioned this much earlier on, I think 3 or 4 months ago to you, where I thought it was so important to bring in the conscious contactees into this. And, you know, a lot of the scientists there didn't warm to this. Others did. And I thought, well, look, really the key to this is a combination of the two, both the mechanistic and the experiential. You need to do the science, yeah, but you want to bring in the experiential, which is the contactees. So,
and is the thinking there that might elicit some type of different behavior from the object that you're watching? The presence
yes.
of a contactee, or what? Where is your thinking at on that?
Yeah, but you have to select the right conscious contactee. It's not any old contactee. I don't mean, look, there are tens of thousands of contactees, all right? And I'm well aware of the CE5 initiative and Skywatcher and psionics and all this stuff. But there's what I find important is there's only very few I've found so far. I think there's 27 conscious contactees I've come across around the world in the last 30 years, we'll say. And I've actually approached 3 of them that I thought were very good. And then I've narrowed it down to 1, because you've got to deal with 1 in the end of the day. And so I actually have a very good conscious contactee who's completely unknown. You know, it's a person that doesn't want publicity or anything. It's just they have this relationship with the other, so to speak.
Now, when you say conscious contactee, Eamonn, are you saying, what does that term mean specifically?
Okay, you have contactees, which I think are unconscious. They don't know what's happening to them. Oh my God, I've got this, something's happening to me with this light and this, that, and the other. And there are thousands of those people around with question marks on it. And they're wondering what's happening to them. All right. Then you have what I call quite a rare group, which is the conscious contactees, who know full well what they're dealing with on a physical level. So it's not something that's invisible or just a little dot of light appearing. There are thousands of people who are able to do this. We have those faculties anyway in our, you know, in our conscious.
Would this be similar to what the Skywatcher psionic people describe when they say they go into this meditative state and then these things appear? Is that what you're talking about? But in addition to that, a relationship. With the Skywatcher and psionics, you have an us and them situation. There's an unknown from their end. All right. Also, which is a fundamental problem, as I see it, in my own opinion, is that you're not treating the relationship right. Because if you want a partnership within a relationship, like a marriage, you could say, is that you needs to be a reciprocal arrangement. So you need to get out of that sort of thinking of an us and them, meaning that when you force a relationship, the agenda of the others, we'll call them the others, all right, made up of NHI, ET, or whatever, they're going to be, I would think they're going to be well aware of that situation. And they don't want to, they won't be interested. But that's my own opinion. So that's very different to what I just mentioned 2 minutes ago, of somebody who's a conscious contactee, who's already got a relationship, who's already had a landing in the past, and if need be, and it has to be how shall I put it? There has to be a really good intent if there's going to be another landing. So
So
let's back up for a second, because I think we're touching on two enormous subjects that are overlapping in a way that can be a little confusing to some people. The first thing that you said is pretty earth-shattering, which is that your research leads you to believe that there are tens of thousands, perhaps, of artificial objects in orbital sync with the Earth, operating on these orbital tracks. Am I assessing that correctly?
you've mentioned thousands. I
Thousand.
don't know. I really don't know. There could be only 10. There could be 1,000. I
But
really don't
some
know
number of artificial satellites that are operating independently of anything humans are doing.
Yeah, well, we'll call them artificial probes that are within our atmosphere at a high altitude. You're talking about what, say, 60 kilometers up, approximately 70. It's below the Kármán line, of the atmosphere and outer space, so to speak. Where you'd have the ISS is at, 90 kilometers. Now, as I said, this is all hypothetical, but the research we've done is showing that this is the case, and that they're doing this orbital revolution of 65 minutes. So you need some sort of Alcubierre anti-gravitational type of system to keep doing that, where we don't seem to have those things. So I'm not sure that's answered your question.
Well, I want to establish, I guess, what I'm getting at is I want to establish, I want to talk about the paper that Beatrice Villarreal put out and her team, because that's in a moment. And I want your take on that paper and your read. But I'm first trying to establish your own work in this area and the findings that you and your team have made, so that we can kind of draw the connections here. And what initially drew me to your work was an interview you did with Tim Ventura, and you were talking about this idea that we might be under some form of surveillance, some kind of automated surveillance. And that, to me, is very interesting. The second side of this is the whole consciousness aspect to it, but I feel like that's a much broader topic, and I want to kind of drill down on this satellite thing for a second. Can you walk us through where are you at today with this thinking, and how do you feel about this idea that we have been possibly under some form of mechanical surveillance for years, if not decades or centuries or more?
Well, the research we've done goes back to the 1880s. So you actually have similar constructs. In other words, we call it a spaceship, a probe, or whatever. And I think I mentioned in the previous interview that how I think the operation works, which I think I've given you some illustrations previously, is that you'd have some sort of supercraft that is stealth or cloaking. And by the way, we've come across this in about 30 reports altogether from Newfork and Hatch. Showing this cloaking going on. So I think actually it's quite possible that you'd have the cloaking taking place at 50 or 60 kilometers up. And then, based on a theory, that on one of the orbital tracks, that particular supercraft then would eject or deliver a number of probes, but they would be at very high velocity dropping, from the actual craft itself. And then this is what people are seeing around, or even as much culminating in a landing, if needed. And of course, it's up to, how should I put it? It's whatever their interest is.
Right.
They could also even go off the track, by 20 or 30 kilometers. And actually, we've looked into this many years ago and wondering why have they gone off. And then we found out, there's obviously something of interest, and it's maybe an occupied type of craft. And this is where there's the potential for a landing taking place, which, there have been landings, as you know, through history on this. And we do actually, I have quite a lot of information in that area as well.
So,
So then on another, just to finish off, then it's either the same craft that's retrieving the probes, and you could have, say, one or two or three or four or five, six probes altogether that are meandering around in the general area, and then they may be only around from 1 minute to minutes, and then they may be then retrieved either by the same supercraft or there's another craft on another orbital track then actually picks them up, but they're all at high velocity when they do go off, and that's why people are amazed when they see this incredible velocity where it just shoots in a fraction of a second.
So these supercraft, is it your thinking that they are an automated system that's running on its own, or do you suspect, based on what you've seen, that there is some organic intelligence somewhere else that's directing this process?
Yeah, I mean, they looking into it further. What I discovered is that, and I know this is common actually in the UFO area, but what is common are plasma craft.
Yeah.
And okay, now, when you explore the whole plasma craft dynamics, what they may be doing. Now, I mean, we do have a list of all the different characteristics of UFOs, but quite a significant number of them are in the plasma area, so to speak. Now, trying to answer your question regarding the entities, the biological and so forth on that, I suspect there is a bioenergetic side to it, because how come they can actually interface with somebody on the ground, a human who also has similar bioenergetic field and so forth, for this interaction to take place, and then the potential for a landing. So there are these relationships that are set up by the others, we'll call them. All right.
I want to lock this idea down, though, really solidly. Are you? Is this this is what you've seen? You're certain that these orbital craft are there's these large craft that are ejecting smaller craft? Like, that's a certainty, or is this a hypothesis?
It's a hypothesis
based on just the timing of the sightings that people are reporting and the data that you're looking at.
Yeah, the sighting timings are so important for the theory to work. If they're out by an hour, we can't use them. But if they're within, say, 10 minutes, 15, yeah, we can use that. Because it's like garbage in, garbage out. You
Right.
really need precise data and timings in order to achieve a future timing when the event may occur at that intersection point.
So
where they were already before. Yeah.
This is about this phase of the research would be about identifying the location and the timing, so you can put a team there or observational equipment there, and you can make recordings and gather data, and then confirm that hypothesis or not, right?
That's correct. Yeah, and I'm actually we have done that. We've had we have recorded about 40 UFOs altogether, which have different constructs, from commonly the plasma balls of light to a cylindrical type plasma type of construct, where on another occasion, which we didn't record, but it was multiply witnessed, was of actually one of those cylindrical type craft. Okay. And we got a lot of details on that. So,
have you given any thought to you're speaking about the shapes and configurations of some of these craft? We hear a lot about balls of light, metallic spheres. Certainly there's discs that have been talked about forever, tic tacs, all these different types of shapes. Do these shapes mean anything to you when you take them, in from a distance, or do they suggest anything or any particular function?
Okay, the closest thing I can think of in this is that if you're dealing with the hypothesis of plasma craft and the dynamics behind a plasma craft, what it can do that we can't do, we're just nowhere near anything to what these others are doing, is that they can morph and change the dynamics in there, and therefore can also change the construct that's there to present it to us. May it be a classical flying saucer disk, to a cylindrical craft and such like. So
Wait,
most people see them as ball.
Say that again. Just spell that out for me. I'm sorry to make you do this again, but they can transform. They can choose the physical shape they appear to us as, but they're otherwise an energy craft.
Yeah, once you have some understanding of the plasma and how it operates, and then you have to integrate the bioenergetic side of things, the pilot, if you like to call it, in there, who are one with the craft. And I only learned this from the Mexican landings way back in the 90s, and it's sort of, I see how they're doing it. So I think actually they can present themselves in different ways to people that's acceptable. So that's as much as I know at this stage. So I'm actually betting it's going to be, if I'm dealing with, say, a conscious contactee, because I know, sorry, I'm just going back on the one that we've selected that we're working with for the last few months, is that he had a previous landing which was multiply witnessed in a remote location, and it was plasma. It was a plasma type craft, extremely bright. So I'm betting actually that this may be the case if our timing graphs work out right, to prove not only the theory but actually to have a recorded sighting in some detail.
Wow. So what is your take on? You said you're familiar with what Skywatcher is doing, which sounds similar in their objectives to some degree. What is your take on what they're doing and how that relates to your own idea of how to approach this?
Well, it's fundamentally okay. It's similar in principle, but the how shall I put it? The anthropomorphic side of things, that is, that the intent is an us and them, and we're trying to acquire assets and all this kind of stuff, governmental, military, and so on. And it's not, maybe some billionaires, involved in it. That I'm not too happy with that approach. And if the consciousness behind this is aware of that, they're not going to get the results. The only way you could get the results, if I may go on a little bit further, is a foundation of balance. You need to set up a partnership. And there is a way to do that. We've actually tested this out some years back, and it does work. So, yeah, that's the only difference between, on your question there, of applying psionics in the Skywatcher project and what we're trying to do. I mean, we're using the theory as one, which we're hoping may work, which they're not using, because we haven't actually published a detailed of how we're doing this yet. Until we get the results, then we will have a second publication which will show actually how this operates. I mean, if we did come out with a second publication on this, by the way, the first one was, which I had mentioned previously to you, was to the AGU 24 in December of last year. But the second paper would be showing the orbital tracks. But I don't want to come out with something like that and find, well, it doesn't work. If we can prove it, that'd be fantastic. We've got confirmation it does work. But in addition to not just this mechanistic approach, the scientific approach that we're dealing with, but we're including the experiential. We're including a contactee or a conscious contactee to enable an interaction to take place. So, as
a non-scientist and as someone who's I'm a enthusiast. I'm a science enthusiast, I think is probably the best way to put it. I wonder, would adding the element of a conscious contactee to an experiment like that introduce a variable that would, affect the data in one way or another? In other words, would it not be better to just record the data of what shows up first, gather that as a baseline, and then at a later time bring in a contactee to see what changes?
Well, we've actually done that.
Oh, you have done
That's
that.
the reason why, yeah, well, it's been 50-50, so to speak.
Okay.
I mean, that's the reason why we set up the installation here in the last 23 years and got recordings, yeah, but some of them do fit actually with the theory. But in order to have better resolution, we needed a huge amount of reports to have a better solution for the theory itself, and then apply that, on the ground.
I understand.
But I also decided that, why don't we have a double whammy here? Do the two, have a conscious contact either. That's why I mentioned it at Hestelin. I said, look, why don't we should be doing this, guys, and all the European guys,
It's so fascinating, and it's so exciting the way that you talk about this, because you're describing a scenario where that could constitute contact in some, in both directions, to be able to exchange information for the first time in a way that's recorded and documented, and people publicly can see it. I mean, that would be a game changer, to be sure.
Well, first of all, it's important to select the right conscious contactee. We feel we have the right one now. It's taken some time after September of last year.
What criteria do you use to arrive at that?
Okay. I've met a number of conscious contactees as far as South America. They've actually flown out to Ireland. They knew what this was about. But even with that, I found that they weren't fully the right persons, or, because I can't mention names, and, there's a personal side to it for some of these people. But there are some exceptional people who nobody knows about at all, and they don't want publicity. Some of the cases you probably know do have a lot of publicity on. The Billy Mayer case is a good example of that. Even you take out the equation all the so-called hoaxing, which was hoaxed by the intelligence community anyway. I knew that from others. And I've met other conscious contactees, even out in Norway. Had 4 hours with one guy who, with his family, seemed to have this relationship with the other, and for a full landing taking place with the family there. But they don't want any publicity about this.
But when you meet with these individuals and you're talking to them, what is your what checklist are you looking at to see if this is the person? Do they need to be able to not manifest, but do you need to see something happen while they're around to convince you, or is it just more of a gut instinct thing, or how are you vetting these people?
Mm-hmm. Well, very similar to what I used to do back in the 90s in vetting people that would have had encounters, no matter what case, C1 up to C2 or 3. So I would spend, depending who I'm dealing with, I could meet them on 3 or 4 occasions, because I would have already recorded quietly what they had told me previously. And if they lie to me, I have it there. And that's the approach I've taken. I have enough experience in that. And I mean, I have met others back in the 90s who've had close-up encounters, phenomenal stuff. But I can't prove it. But after meeting them a number of times, I thought, yeah, there may be something in this, because there was another witness over here that saw it as well. So I'm relying actually not just on the conscious custody, but also the witnessing. So I've narrowed it down to, in the South American case, it was multiply witnessed, all right, but I could see there was other problems there, which I don't want to go into here, which could be personal problems for the people. There's some people that are not able to integrate this reality. And for me, that is a problem if we're going to do something in the future together. In the one I've selected after some months of researching all this and meeting a number of conscious contactees, I've actually found the right person now who's had no publicity, is not interested at all. They have this relationship already with the others. They also have two very special skills, which I suppose is not surprising. One is that they have a telepathic skill and also remote viewing as well. It seems to be natural, innate with the person I'm dealing with. So in that, where some of the others, yes, they have the telepathic, a little bit of remote viewing, but this guy in particular seems to has everything. And so I selected him, but also he has the right energy as well, the right resonance, because when you're dealing with something like this in the future, you need to have the right resonance. What I mean by that is you're talking about the frequency here. If you have a pretty low frequency, like I shouldn't mention, I suppose military and governments and other agendas, billionaires' minds, oh, we'll get those assets and make another billion or whatever. Forget about it. It's the wrong resonance. It's a low frequency resonance. What I need is a high frequency. And I can tell, actually, if someone has a high... I'm talking about heart energy. Heart energy disrupts the fear frequencies. So this guy actually has that. And so I've developed a relationship with him on a heart basis. See, others may not understand this, but it's like you have to spend years of researching all this out and then... Yeah. So,
but I understand what you mean, and I think that's one of the things that might, at the same time, make this more interesting and a little bit more difficult for some people to understand what it is that you're talking about, because it sounds like you're talking about a very, methodical, rigorous scientific approach to something that will produce data that can be analyzed and graphed and charted. And then you're also adding in this other element that is much more based in the, I don't want to, spiritual has so much baggage with it, but it's more of a, what is it I'm trying to say here? It's more tied into the esoteric side. It's not something that can be so easily measured. And does that sound about right? I mean, I know what you mean. The energy when you're with the person, you feel it or you don't.
Yeah, well, human being has a biofield around it. All right, we have biofields. All right, so call it an energy, and therefore there's a resonance. And depending on where you are on the, in your growth rate, we all have different frequencies. I mean, there are people actually that specialize in this area using tuning forks to find out your frequency. On the average, most people are, well, I've heard through a metaphysician whom I know. I've asked her, I said, well, what's the average? She says it's about 325 up to 375 hertz. All right. It's the average frequency. And I said, do you get anybody beyond that? Well, there'd be rare occasions, she said. Yeah. So what I'm looking for are people that have a high frequency beyond 375, we'll put it.
Is this something that you would measure with instruments, or is this something that can be measured with instruments?
Yes, this can be measured with. It's not. I mentioned tuning forks because that's the other way of doing it, but they do actually have measuring equipment to measure your frequency.
Is this connected in any way to? I remember many years ago there were this photographic technique for taking pictures of auras around people or energy fields around people. I think it was a Soviet process that developed in the Soviet Union.
Kirlian photography.
Yes. Yeah. Is it similar to this or related in any way, or are these different things?
Yes. Well, that's an old way of doing it, using photographic plates. Yeah. Now they have sensors that can actually do this.
There's a guy field, actually, if you look at one of those images, that field is the field that we're talking about. If someone wanted to see
that's what we're talking about. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, if people want to find out more, years ago, I researched this out to see if it was for real. In the USA, this is it, the Heart Math Institute. and they specialize in heart resonance, Heart Math Institute. And, for example, I've seen videos with tests of people where they would open up their heart to a tree that's 200 feet away, and then the coil detector, this is back in the 90s now, and then the coil detector starts sort of jumping around. It's picking up the heart energy. So,
Wow.
so it doesn't pick up the fear energy. In fact, that's why you have a situation globally. If you take, for example, the Middle East, and of course you have a skew in the male and female. The feminine energy is reduced more. So you end up with denaturing of the of nature. In other words, there's less feeding of the environment taking place from a heart point of view. So that's why you have a lot of wars going on at these places, as well. And
I'm spitballing this question, so please forgive me if it's a little bit weird. But when we talked a minute ago about plasma craft, plasma entities, or these plasma things that people see, you may have already made this connection and I just missed it, but are we saying that, or are you suggesting that these energy field type craft or beings are interacting with our energy fields, and that's the key to this whole thing, this whole dynamic, is that there's this, we can't see it without instrumentation, but there is a field that's there that is somehow drawing them in or getting their attention, or am I completely off base on this?
No, you're not actually, because if you take, for example, another example is the Billy Mayer case. Mm-hmm. He has a high frequency, that guy. I've actually have friends, one friend that stayed with him for 6 months back years ago, and then another 2 friends who do all the translations, because I got interested in that case, besides many other cases I was looking at, as to physical results. And this guy, Billy Mayer, definitely has a high frequency, a heart energy, according to my friends who have dealt with him, that is.
Is the heart energy and the frequency that we're talking about here connected to external physical abilities that some people might have? Like, I'm thinking of, there's a gentleman named Wim Hof. Are you familiar with him? W-I-M.
Yeah, I've heard the name. Yeah.
He's one of these people who is capable of these astonishing physical feats, and he's able to submerge himself in frozen lakes for like an hour at a time. He can sit outside in the snow and there's steam coming out. You could do these really bizarre, unbelievable things. But when you talk about someone who has a high energy frequency and seems to be psionically capable in one way or another, I wonder if there are other attributes that might be connected to this thing. And I guess what I'm driving at in broad strokes here is that if we're talking about something that can be detected with instrumentation, then you could have a screening process. You could start to figure out, well, who's marks above this line, and that starts to give us some really interesting, solid information that we can connect some dots with. I think the problem that a lot of people have with Skywatcher, for instance, and maybe some of these other groups, is that it's kind of opaque what it is that they're actually getting at here. It's like, are these people psychic? Are they talking to these craft, or what is happening here? And it sounds like, when I listen to you explain it, it sounds like it's a frequency thing, it's a energy level thing, so it's something that's inherent in certain people that they just have, or is this something that's can be cultivated and raised through practice, and is there, are there techniques that could be used to manage and influence it in some way?
Well, I never thought of that before, but I would imagine you'd have to cultivate it if you're in a state of fear half the day. But I imagine so.
That's most of us, certainly me.
But to answer your question, sorry, what was the other? You mentioned something else there.
I was all over the place. I can try again.
To do with instrumentation, the thing is, dealing with this conscious contactee I'm dealing with, is that I said, look, my intent in all this and our small team is for scientific research. That's all. That we don't have any other hidden agenda, unless we can confirm that this is for real. and that's been accepted, meaning it's not just the conscious contactee, but he's had interaction with the other, and it's come back. So I've had many meetings every 2 or 3 weeks with this person, and then I would present, more questions, or I'd be listening to him, what he has to say, and then what communications he's had already, and if it's confirmed that our selected team is the right team, and what the intent is, the purpose behind all this, that it's to bring in a new level of awareness onto the planet, but we can only try, and but so far so good. It's a softly process,
but it's brilliant. It's so clever, and it's very it's very creative. It's very original thinking. I love the way that you're approaching it, and I guess the reason I'm asking these questions is because I'm trying to clarify and crystallize in my mind exactly what this looks like, this process, and also to figure out what the medium is through which communication would take place. Because I think my sense is that we're past the stigma, more or less, in broad terms. I mean, this is more or less a mainstream topic now. It's on every major podcast. Everybody in the world's talking about it on some level or another. Spielberg has another movie coming out. There's how much more mainstream can it be? And these things are clearly here. People have seen them for decades. I mean, there's no question that there's something here. It's doing something. It's interacting. It's making moves. There's activity taking place. So the conversation in my mind should be much farther along than are they real? We should be talking about how are they communicating? What are they trying to say, if anything? What can we say back? Who is in charge of that messaging? What is their behavior? What can we imply? What can we infer? How do we start getting answers other than, yes, they're real? We seem to be still hung up a little bit on that. And it just seems like you're thinking much farther along than a lot of people in this space.
Sure. Yeah. So, you mentioned about the communications. Yeah. I have selected the right people for the team. These will be technologists involved in astrophysics, electronics, engineering, that side of things. So I felt the right guys for this. And then I have a second team, which would be the communication operatives team, as I would call it. Now, I'm not saying this will come up or would be allowed yet. I just don't know. It's one of the questions I have. So it's not just I'm hoping for a landing for this. We've designed all the equipment already. It's taken some months. It's mobile, so it has to be transported. Some of it's fairly sophisticated equipment. It's cost quite a lot of money, actually, the whole thing. But it's based on a lot of the developments we did back, 20 years ago. But for something like this, I had asked, actually, where will the location be for this? Would it fit into, our theory as well? And sure enough, to my surprise, it did actually fit the intersection point. And it is in a remote location, very remote, quite a difficult place to get to, in Europe.
In Europe. So, okay.
In Europe, yeah. So in that light, it's a complex project. Obviously, personally, I've never done anything like this before, but I feel that bringing all my experiences over 35 years, hopefully might come up with a result that we're all after. So that is the scientific side, because we'd have set the intent. The intent is, it's not a, what do you call it, space watcher intent, it's totally anti. It has to be aligned with the Earth, because what I understand from this guy, and I have spoken to other conscious contactees, it's all to do with in the environment, to do with the alignment of the Earth, with everything, with nature and so forth. And it's like, if you're listening to all these cases, well, that's the way to go, not doing a Spacewatch approach.
Right.
Us and them, we want your assets. And it's like, what? That doesn't serve anything on the Earth at all. So our approach is a more natural, organic part of why we're here, I think, all of us, to be aligned with the Earth, with nature, and so forth.
Just a moment ago, you said that you asked what location this would take place at. Can you take me back to that question? Who did you talk to, and how did you arrive at the location?
Yeah, I actually had to ask the conscious contactee, because I had no idea where this would happen. And the person then gradually sort of told me where it would be, and that I can check it out, which I did actually, and found it quite remote and really mountainous.
Are we talking about like an expedition, with off-road equipment, or are we talking about a small town in the middle of nowhere? Or
no towns anywhere. This is it means bringing vehicles with all this equipment, and of course fun. I don't want all the equipment damaged, of course, so we have to design for all the vibration, everything for this. And so it's a location actually where it's miles away, or kilometers, we say in Europe, away from any dwellings anywhere. So you can actually, I can appreciate it now, where with such an event of that nature, if with the potential that there is a landing, that's what we're all hoping for, according to that it would make sense, So,
okay, paint a picture for me as best you can of what this expedition might look like. Are we talking about 5-10 people, a couple of SUVs? Are we talking about camping out in the mountains someplace and waiting for something to happen? I mean, what's your time frame that you'd like to see this unfold in? What kind of expenses would be attached to this? Or do you have an idea of what it would cost to pull this off?
Okay, well, most of the funding and everything for this has already been not only confirmed, but has been used as well. And it's just all the logistics one is dealing with now. Yes, there are, how should I put it? There's in the team, I think there's about 8 or 9 altogether. There's a lot of supporting. Okay. You could say there are 3, let's see. There are 3 teams altogether, but in one group team. This is the way I've designed it. Mm-hmm. So first of all, you'd have a supporting team which have wide sensory systems. In other words, as a human being, they've got wide sensory systems, like psychic, if you like to put it, remote viewing or whatever. Then the second team may not be as much having such developed psychic abilities, but our intuition will be very good, and so forth. But these would be the technologists. So you have the electronics, astrophysics side, and also the engineering as well. And then the third team, small team, is what I call the communication operatives. So this would be a cluster of a small team where in the event, if there is a landing taking place, I mean, that's what the plan is, but there has to be an intent behind it. Why are we doing this? So I've already mentioned that to you. So you'd have a small team, what I call, sorry, I'm repeating myself again, because I've never discussed this with anybody.
No, this is awesome. Please keep going. I'm just listening.
So you have the communication operatives, which I think may be made up of 4 at this stage, where the conscious contactee would be fully supported in their communications with the beings of the plasma craft. I'm actually asking for, well, hopefully, it could be denied, I don't know yet, but actual meeting, with the beings themselves. Now, the problem here, even if that was successful, we have a problem from a technological point of view, is that this comes down to the designing of the instrumentation, because we can only guess what frequency that these beams may be at and the craft itself. Because when I don't know if you know, but a plasma craft, you can't detect using LiDAR, radar, and the electromagnetic fields. This is problematic, and this is why I've told the conscious community that in order to get the result from a scientific end, we need to be whoever he's dealing with needs to be able to present itself, so that we can get data, and not finding, oh my God, all our batteries are all gone dead, which is a typical thing actually in some of these closer encounters, that's still unfolding at this point in time. So there are three groups or core team, you could say, with different functions here.
And the idea would be you go to this location. I'm assuming you would arrive a few days in advance of the anticipated meeting or event, set up equipment, set up your base camp, and then wait and then observe. Is that the idea?
Yeah. No, there would be a specified time for this. I have asked that question, and that's something that's still unfolding. Or shall I say, still in development, that to have a more precise timing, you could say. When I say precise, I don't mean to the minute, but more, that day it's going to happen.
I guess what I'm wondering is the gear that you would need to bring to bear on this to get to document it properly. What setup do you need for that? Is it like quick? Or are we talking about like a day or two to set it up and switch everything on and make sure it's all on?
It would take about a day. Some of the equipment is rather like semi-military, near infrared type systems, tracking systems, to high-speed camera systems, gamma ray detectors. There's a range of different cameras doing different jobs, we'll say, as parts of the spectrum. And then you'd have to have all the other, ancillary equipment, like radiation detectors gamma ray detectors, if you want to put it, or EM field detectors and such like. But we still have to explore interfacing all this together, so it comes up on multiple screens, so that's still early for us at the moment. As to when it's going to take place, you were asking about that a few minutes ago. I've asked that, and it's been accepted that the second half of this year.
Wow, that's right around the corner.
We're in it in the moment, yeah. So yeah, it's.
I mean, I guess the sense that I'm getting is that you're not. This is a delicate operation that has a lot of moving parts and a lot of people involved. So it's going to take some time to get everybody organized and transported to the location. What kind of wiggle room do you think you're going to have, considering that there are so many different moving parts?
I don't know yet.
Okay.
I haven't worked on that. There are other external to this, other scientists that I am planning to approach. Some of them I know. Over the years, physically met them and so forth, who have expertise. Some of them are well known, we'll put it that way. You can guess who they might be. And that would have an affinity for the scientific side of this, but they wouldn't be into me bringing it further, bringing in the whole, interfacing with, the consciousness side. But all I'm interested in is getting for their ends, it would be the science behind this, the data, and the analysis, depending what data we get, from all the different sensors. So it's very similar to some of the, UAPX to what do you call it? Is it the Tedesco brothers? Is it?
Yeah.
These people, yeah,
In New Jersey.
Yeah. They're all doing great work there. It's scientific and so forth. Yeah, really good. It's just that we'll be bringing some different instrumentation, some fairly heavy duty stuff into this. And of course, then adding on what I think is important is the whole experiential area.
Do you have you given any thought to how you're going to document all of this in case you do have a successful moment? Is there going to be someone there with a camera recording everything as you go, or how do you?
Yes, there will be. Yes, in fact, one or two may be selected just for this as the supporting group, that first group that is, for them to, because the more camera footages, the better in this. Multiple cameras, besides just the scientific cameras, which are also, there's 3 or 4 of them altogether. So that it would be recorded. Yeah.
Is there any benefit? And I'm asking you just from your own expertise. Would there be a benefit to having 2 camera teams maybe a mile apart so you get different angles on whatever it is that you see from 2 different places, or is there a point of diminishing returns with something like that?
Okay, one of the problems, and I have checked up with, how should I put it, some of the media TV type companies, all right? I have, what is it? Without mentioning anything, without them knowing an event like this, they won't be ready for it. Mm-hmm. They would be freaking out with this. It would be problematic
to involve
That's all I can say.
A second
group.
I
have. A group like what you were saying, having another group out there, but
I meant from your
different
own
vantage points,
just from your own team. Like you have a base camp space where you're set up with the main control center or whatever the equipment is, and then you have a B team that's maybe a kilometer away with just optical camera gear, taking footage of whatever the area is in case there is some sighting. You would at least have 2 teams getting it from 2 different angles.
Sorry, I misunderstood. I misunderstood you there. Yes, you're right. That is possible to do in something like this. I was thinking more of outsiders, which.
No. I would imagine you'd want this to be completely secret until after the fact, right? You wouldn't want to risk contaminating the site.
Yeah, no, I think what you brought up, Clint, is certainly a good idea. To be honest with you, I hadn't thought of that. It was more just within 100 meters of us that we'd have all these cameras. But I'd have to really look at that to see if it was possible, say, some hundreds of meters at a different angle.
I just think
could it be done?
My actual profession, outside of talking about UFOs all the time, is I'm a photographer, and I often think about the optics of trying to observe something, and getting different vantage points might just be a way of protecting yourself in case some equipment goes down or you have a different, something happens with the first team and there's some issue. At least having a backup, and if you're going to have a backup, you might as well put them a little further away. Then you get the benefit of both angles in case there is something that happens. I mean, it just seems like such an exciting moment. Anything could happen. If something does, you really want to be ready for it, don't you? Yeah,
I know. I think you're right, because obviously you're a professional in the field. I wouldn't have thought of things like that. It's just not my area. That's why I was saying earlier on that I'm into completely new territory here.
That's so cool, though. It's so
But
cool.
the thing is, like, you have to bite the bullet, as they say in America, and just go for it. It's like you bring it up to a certain point, and do we just leave it at that? And really, this is what I call second generation UAP, which brings in all the communications in a proper sense, more meaningful, organizing the whole thing. So that's why I presented this in Esteland last year. I thought this is the way to go. And instead of just, the current approaches that have been taking place. Oh, sure enough, I mean, with due respect to the scientific side, yeah, you get all the data, but so what? You still are wondering what the hell is all this.
Well, I think
So
that's it.
I've just gone on. I've just done a quantum leap, you could say. Let's go for it.
You've got to go from passive to active at some point. We are a part of this process, whether or not we like it. We may as well take an active role. I like that thinking.
Absolutely, yeah.
I want to change gears a little bit, but we're going to stay on the topic of unusual findings, and I want to talk about this paper, Aligned Multiple Transient Events in the First Palomar Sky Survey, which was put out earlier this month, or I believe late last month, by Beatrice Virarel and her team. And this is a paper that has been submitted for peer review. I think it's under peer review right now, if I'm not mistaken. And they looked at photographic plates from the 1950s and basically we're finding these anomalous objects in orbit that seem to defy explanation. Have you looked at this paper and can you give me your assessment of what it is they were trying to find here and what do you think of all this?
Yeah, I've looked at the paper and the results do support and do tie in with the transients, nuclear activity, and UAP as well. So the associations are persisting even after 1953, when the UAP reports at nuclear sites dropped. Though the transients in test windows stopped after 1956. So the links challenge is a simple explanation, like, plate defects, or those wouldn't correlate with any distant events, if you have that. Instead, you have the possibilities, which it does include atmospheric effects from the tests, or more speculatively, UAP has orbiting objects drawn to nuclear sites. And of course, if you've heard, I'm sure you heard the Malcolm interview, which I found absolutely fascinating, and particularly this baiting type of approach, which it's not nice, sending up a nuclear system. I mean, oh, come on, this is just, So the small effect from her paper, the small effect sizes likely stem from possibly data noise. Automated transient detection might include errors. That's a possibility. And of course, UAP reports vary in reliability, even back in those days, And and of course, the Palomar, where it was taken at the Palomar Observatory in Southern California, so it's only viewing part of that sky. So really, I actually had thought of that previously in one of her first papers, could this be a problem? So you could have a bias there. So the future work could redefine detection with artificial intelligence and validate UAP data better, So that's my take on it anyway. So I think there's future work too. And also the other one is having, and I understand she knows this already, Beatrice, of exploring other observatories' plates, taken in Europe and also in the States, ones that you wouldn't hear about that much. I think the only limiting factor there, and it depends on the limiting magnitude, is that you're dealing with smaller observatories. At the time when Palomar in operation. I mean, this was a 1.2 meter or 48-inch Schmidt telescope, wide field of view of, I can't remember, 2 or 3 degrees or something, and which would go down to 21st magnitude. But these other observatories may only go down to 16 or 17 magnitude. But it depends on, what was recorded with the Palomar plates. They appear to be around the 15 or 16 magnitude with these transients that dropped out and then appeared somewhere else, I think. But yeah.
So would the observations from other observatories, were there any other observatories at that time of that capability elsewhere in the world, or in the Soviet Union perhaps, or that could be compared with that data?
At that period, no. A lot of the instruments were down to a third of that size, half that size, or a third. So then there's a limiting magnitude problem here, because they'd only exposed down to whatever 18th magnitude, sort of, the Palomar's 21st. There was a sister Schmidt telescope, identical, which was established in Australia, but that was much later. I think it was during the 60s. So
would the Vatican Observatory have anything like that, or is that?
It's too small. You're dealing with a 25 centimeter, or sorry, a 10-inch or 12-inch refractor. That'd be too small for that period of time. I think the Czechoslovakia, I think they had a sizable instrument. I'm trying to think of it. There is a more sizable instrument, but not on the scale of the Palomar size. That may have gone down to 18th magnitude. But I suspect, as I was repeating myself, I think she's following through with other observatories around the world, for that period of time.
Well, it just seems like we lately in this space, there's been a lot of discussion, certainly, from yourself and the work that you've done. Avi Loeb a few years ago was mentioning some interesting observations about Oumuamua. We have 3i Atlas now, and there's this persistent conversation about whether or not that is a natural object or some form of artificial craft, possibly because of the unusual nature of its speed and trajectory and course. I just wonder what, if stepping back from all of this, where is your head at right now with all of this talk going on? You've been in this space doing this work for quite some time. What do you think about the news lately?
Well, I did look into the Atlas one, and you have to realize that because of our technology, instrumentation, particularly for detectors, interstellar, we'll call them interstellar rocks, asteroids, have been there all the time, coming into the solar system. It's only just with our detectors that we're picking them up now in the last 3 or 4 years. Mm-hmm. And of course, when you have the Vera Rubin Observatory in Chile, it's got an amazing limited magnitude. It's going to pick up, I'm sure, at least 100 a year. So anyway, trying to answer your question there. It's speculation is a problem when it comes in, and it can hit the jackpot in the media. They only have to take one segment of that speculation and think it's for real. Like, what was it? Some potential invasion of the Earth? I don't know.
I find it seems interesting that makes sense to me, that the media runs with it, and certainly the podcast people and on YouTube that takes off. But it seems like, in particular, Avi Loeb, he seems very he's sticking to this talking point. He hasn't just said, well, it could be, maybe, and then moved on. He's staying on this, and I just find that interesting, particularly considering all this talk recently about techno-signatures around the Earth, and it just seems like to your point earlier about the evolution of ufology over the years, it seems like we have sort of just recently turned the page into this very weird new area of discussion, techno-signatures possibly being here for a long time, monitoring us, this other thing that could possibly be, this isn't the first time Avi has mentioned this. He started with Oumuamua first, and now he's mentioning it with 3i Atlas. And I just find that interesting, Well,
no, Avi Loeb is right, what he's saying. It's unfortunate that other scientists and SETI don't speak that way. That's why he gets into arguments. He's just opening up the whole arena of, 30% possibility because of all these strange orbital eccentricities or something. Well, that's okay. You can put that into it. But to say there's 100%, I know he hasn't done that. It's the media have selected that part and then blown it to kingdom come after. And that's why everybody's in a state of, oh my God, we're going to.
So your view is that he's just doing what scientists should be doing. He's allowing for the possibility, and he's assigning a percentage value to it, but he's not ruling out everything else. He's just saying it's possible.
It is possible. Yeah.
So we're going from it can't ever be aliens to it could be aliens, but maybe not. That's brilliant. We talked about your team. We talked about contactee reports and observations. I feel like we've covered quite a bit of ground here. Is there something that we haven't touched on yet that you want to discuss?
Well, I tend to be conservative in my whole approach in all this, although it might be quite liberal at the end of the day. But I feel that what we're spearheading has the potential of, discovery of a techno-signature. And again, that's the language we have to use in the science community, even though they're, still after techno-signatures around exoplanets and possible techno-signatures in the solar system. And, and of course, there has been that perception problem, which I think we discussed before, for the last 70 or 80 years, that if it's in your backyard, and that's been a problem I've had with discussions with others over the years, other scientists who are not comfortable with this. And I respect where they're all coming from because, they have hard beliefs. And if only they could soften their beliefs, I think we'd have progressed a lot further.
It just seems so reasonable to me that, life on Earth started billions of years after the rest of the universe was here. It seems like there's been plenty of time for other civilizations to come and go. Whatever system we're in right now, we emerged into. It was pre-existing when we got here. So why wouldn't there be techno-signatures everywhere? It just seems like a very reasonable way to think. What would it mean for you personally? I mean, internally, when you think about this, and you've obviously been fascinated with this for your entire career, it seems. What would it change for you if it could be proven that techno-signatures are in our backyard, as you said?
What would it do for me personally?
How would you react? Like, I mean, I get excited like I'm 9 years old talking about this. To me, it's that level of excitement. I just wonder, you've been looking at it, for years and studying it, and we may be on the cusp of being able to prove that it's right there in our own backyard. What would that feel like if you could verify that?
Well, it'd be a hell of an accomplishment. That's one. It would have confirmed everything I thought about years ago, that this was possible, like what we're doing now, that is. And it wasn't so much a dream, actually, back in the 90s. I think if every astronomer, astrophysicist had gone out to what I did and actually, did 150 cases to find out. Well, of course, Jacques Vallée did this as well, of course. He was an astronomer. But yeah, personally, it would be confirmed everything. You know, that I mean, you could speculate then after that. You know, that once that discovery is made. Um, it's I know you're excited about this. I'm sure everybody else is. I've been told by others who know me, say, "Hey, you're everything is matter of fact with you and normal." And I said, "Yeah, well, that's the way I am." You know, I said, "Look, if we have an event like that, actually, I know another guy. He's an astronomer. He's really, I'll just say he's from Italy. He's a very good friend of mine. Known him for decades." And he's like me a bit, you know, serious doing the science. And if a landing occurs, he'd be still at it, you know, like, or in his case, he was out in Norway. I remember what, 23 years ago, there was a team from Italy and the Norwegians, and this triangular craft came over, and everybody was freaking out. And of course, my friend just cool and taking it in. And then his professor had a real problem after when this happened back at the hotel. His wife had to take him to the toilet every so often, you know.
Oh,
So
wow.
the thing is, there are people that are not able to integrate that reality, and of course they couldn't publish anything because they wouldn't get funded again,
Yeah.
you know. You know, and this is what it's all about. Do you
Well,
want the
that's what
truth?
I think is so interesting about this time, Eamon, is that there is now such a groundswell of support among the enthusiasts in the UFO community that if you wanted to crowdfund anything, like any legitimate research into this area, people would donate to that just to be a part of it. I feel like there's a very strong sense amongst at least all the people I talk to in this space that the other shoe is going to drop. There's something around the corner over the next hill that we're working on it. We're getting closer, but there's a there, and we're going to find it if we just stay on this. Is that your sense as well? It must be.
Oh yeah, I mean, my attitude is you keep at it all the time. If you know a truth and it's real, that's there, you just go for it and
You go
just
for
do
it.
it. And that's my attitude. And other guys who know me, how shall I put it? It creates one of my, well, he works with me, and he's also a friend as well. But he would say to me, Eamon, he said, I'm years younger than you, but you have more energy than anybody I've known around, and youngsters. Well, I said, look, it's all down to passion. If you have a passion in something, you love what you're doing, you can get the results, you know. So
It's a passion, and it's a temperament thing, and I think it's an open-mindedness, and you have to remain flexible enough to find a way to incorporate this into the larger reality. I do think that a lot of people will have difficulty with it, and I think that communicating to those folks is going to be a process that all of us have to participate in. I think this is a collective moment of trying to understand it as a society, and I wonder. To the extent that people who see this interview, and I imagine quite a few people will see it, if they do want to help you or lend a hand or spread the word or do something, what can they do, if anything, and how would you suggest they get involved?
okay. My aim, actually, if we achieve this, is to get it on mainstream. It's not the UFO community, alternative community. This is not for the. I know it'll go viral if it came out through, but we need to. I'm actually exploring this already. In fact, if this happens with a top journalist, you know, how do you crack this one, get it into mainstream? You know, so that's something that we're working on, because. You know, okay, you have to come out with the right papers for this, peer reviewed and all this stuff. All right, that's one. Number two, those papers have to be recognized by the some of the science media type magazines. You know, like the New Scientist, as an example of that. All right, there's only a very few of these take this kind of stuff and then get the message out. That could be still problematic there. I'm thinking of having the right media there for this. Well, what's the right media in mainstream? It is problematic worldwide. It's not an American thing. Okay,
Yeah.
so that's the one I want to crack. That's my aim, actually. If we succeed, that is, it has to go into the mainstream, because once it's in the mainstream, well, I don't know what the ramifications would be after that. I won't be around for that.
I think
If you know what I mean.
is there a way that people can I know you said you already secured funding, but is there any way that the average person, if they wanted to lend a hand or support, is there any way for them to support what you're doing, or is it best to just hang back and wait for the data?
I would hang back. Actually, I've been keeping this really private. All this is actually, well, besides the piece in Hesterland, I think this is actually the first time I've presented some of this material now. I know it's all verbal, but that's our main project at the moment. Is this? It's a complex project to do, but we're hoping we will succeed in it.
I think it's a very fascinating time to be interested in this topic, because there is a growing chorus of people of very high levels of expertise and professional backgrounds, of course, yourself and others like Avi Loeb and Gary Nolan and many others. It seems like in the academic community there is an openness now that wasn't there maybe a few years ago to start accepting some of these ideas, and I think that's just a very exciting sign of things to come. I could talk for another hour easily, but I want to be respectful of your time. Is there what is the next step to this, and when will we learn more about the next steps that you've taken and what you do from here?
Well, we're okay. We have a paper that we have to get published very soon, and then there'll be a second paper which would incorporate what I've been talking about today, but in a way that's more academically accepted, but without actually putting the experiential and consciousness side to it, because it won't be accepted. So I have to treat it mechanistically, so to speak. So it'll be the second paper. But I'd probably have one or two papers that I'll write up later on, which if we do have a breakthrough, then I think everybody needs to know, how was this done? This whole thing. And that's why I want to share, through papers, that is. They may not be accepted peer-reviewed, but there are other avenues to publish papers. There are very fast publishing sites, so to speak, which are acceptable. There's a lot of scientists go through these because they can't wait for 9 months for a peer review for something. I think Beatrice Vellerol is going through that at the moment. Yeah. That's why she got out the preprint, So be something like that. Security is another factor as well. I'm well aware of the monitoring that's going on. I mean, there's multiple monitoring going on. Number one, it's not just the government intelligence's monitoring. I know we're all monitored. I know in some shape or form. However, there is another global monitoring going on, which I found out only very recently, by the others, and that monitoring has sensors that have sensed every single person on the planet. So they know who's who.
What are you referring to? What are you referring to specifically?
What I'm referring to, through our conscious contactee, who's developed. He's been 3-4 years with this relationship going. But in my design of questions, to this conscious contactee, that I was told that every single person on the planet is monitored. Sorry, is monitored. Yeah, or should I say their frequency is determined, and that's no surprise because I heard about this through the Billy Mayer stuff way back in the early '90s. That everybody is monitored. So in one sense, I think it's really good to know that, so you can differentiate between people for this. Is it going to cause a problem for governments and military? I think if it came in dramatically like many years ago, it would have been totally suppressed. But I think actually maybe it's the right timing. As you quite rightly said, Clint, there's a lot more awareness now in different categories with science and society and so forth. I mean, there's an awful lot of people know zero what's going on to do with all this, and but you know yourself that once you have a percentage of people that are aware, awake, or whatever to all this, and it seems to be progressing that way anyway. When you look at the whole geopolitical situation that's been going on, I think it might work. There is a tipping point for something like this to be acceptable. I realize, with all the 6 different religions and all this, and at least the Vatican came out years ago and said, our brothers and sisters are out there on other planets. Well, that's great to know.
That's my thing, right? Like the Vatican knows more than they let on. And to make a statement like that sounds very much like hedging your bets, like getting your ducks in a row. I don't know that. I can't prove it, but it just seems like you'd want to be on the record a few years before something big happened. And if you knew it was coming, if something was going to happen, or you suspected strongly that it might, it would be a good idea to get the billion or so Catholics in the world on the same page in advance of that. So.
Well, they've had 1,700 years, the Catholic Church, 1,700 years off with their whole intelligence side. I mean, they're the best intelligence system going.
Yeah.
Even before any Western or US came about, they already had it hundreds of years before that. I mean, just
their archives must be unbelievable. I can't imagine what they've got in there.
I mean, the Jesuits are masters at this, So, so I think it's we're. I know people I meet around, and they're seeing the world in a different way to me, actually. If you're watching the television and radio, actually it was there was somebody that asked me there a while back, Eamonn, do you have a television? No. Well, don't you have a radio? No, but I can go out to the car and listen to the radio there. But what do you do? Well, we actually talk to each other.
Imagine.
And it's like, it's just different worldview.
Different world. Dr. Ansbro, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with me again. I know it's later in the day for you, and I appreciate it. Is there anything you'd like to add before we wrap up?
Well, we're in exciting times. That's all I can say. And with all the theatre and confusion, in the UFO community and all these hearings and so forth, it may not happen, the so-called disclosure out there in the US. I think it may happen in another country. And so don't be surprised what that outcome might be.
Well, hopefully it'll happen when you and your team are there in place and with equipment running and we get it all on camera, because what you're describing sounds like it could be a really miraculous moment in human history. Dr. Ansbro, thank you again. I'll let you get back to your work and back to your regular life, but let's touch base again soon, and I would love to hear more about where this goes in the second half of the year, and I wish you the best of luck.
Well, thank you, Clint, and thanks for the invitation and the opportunity of presenting this.